the party hears their fighter whispering love things to his sword at night. You know this is not going to end well. Years ago, I was playing first edition Dungeons and Dragons. I was running the game. And character, it's the party is first level. They haven't really done an awful lot. And the party comes down a corridor and they see a burnt and mangled body laying in the center of the floor, and there's all these dead orcs around the body. It's been desiccated and dried, and it's been dead for a long time. Party comes up to it, and the fighter, the young first level fighter, sees that the character has this sword, and he says, "I want the sword." The fighter that had been fighting these orcs obviously lost the battle, though he killed a large number of them. And the fighter pries open the hands of the skeletal remains and pulls out this dirty, grime-encrusted sword, and he says he wants it. So that party doesn't think anything about it. He takes the sword, and that night he's cleaning it and polishing it, and it does clean up and polish up very nicely. And the party keeps going on. The fighter always seems to be rushing to the front of the battle and charging, and he's doing amazingly well. As they go along, they finally decide to do some detect magic, and they detect that the sword that the fighter has is magical. They know it's a magical sword, and he loves the sword. I mean, he's going out there, and they attack, and he's just wailing on the enemy, and he's doing much better than you would expect. So over time, the fighter increases in level, and the party notices something a little odd, that whenever the fighter, they gain some treasure and they come back to town, the first thing the fighter does is he takes all his gold, and obviously he goes to the blacksmith. I mean, to the metal, to the armorer, and instead of what most people would expect, he has the armorer create this ornate, expensive scabbard made of silver and gold. And he's got this scabbard for this sword, and he just polish up. He does get the dings and dents out of his armor, but he's not really wearing plate mail. He's wearing, he's wearing ring mail, and he's not doing, he's not really interested in mail, and he's just going out and charging into battle. Normally you would expect a tank-like character to want to be heavily armored, but he's not. And he goes in there, and he seems to turn down any other magical weapons. So they keep going on, and the fighter's doing extremely well, and he always the first one charging into battle and swinging his sword, and he's lopping off heads, and he's doing wonderful things, but he's taking a bit of damage too. So this goes on for a long time. The party notices that at night they hear him whispering to his sword, and he's very enamored of his sword. Things go on for a while, and like in most adventures, the party spends time out in the wilderness, and then they come back to town and things like that. So they don't spend a lot of time around farms and such. So finally one day they have a cart, and they load up all their equipment on the cart, because they take the cart till they get closer to the next adventure, and here you have the character in the back of the cart just dozing, and then suddenly he wide awake, wakes up, looks out there, and he says, "I smell cow manure." He steps up to the front, and off to the side of the road there's a small herd of cattle. He leaps off the cart, charges up to the first cow, pulls out his sword and just slaughters it. Parts of the cow are flying, and he attacks every cow in sight. And you hear him screaming, "Die, you cud chewing monsters!" And he slaughters them all. Well, the party's a little sort of concerned about their fighter now, because he's getting a little strange. And they give some gold to the farmer for his slaughtered herd. And they ask the guy, and he says, "Those are evil, terrible beasts." And the party goes, "Okay, is this," and, the players are actually sort of curious. Is this role play, and what is going on here? So anyway, they keep going on. They learn to try and avoid anywhere where there's cattle. So the character's now getting up in a higher level. He's about 4th level. And they, sitting around the campfire at night, they get these, they're talking about exploits, and then they get some odd questions from the fighter. And the fighter asks, "Do centaurs chew cud?" Which is an interesting philosophical question. Cows chew cud, horses really don't. So centaurs arguably don't. But then the follow-up question is, well, do minotaurs chew cud? Which, you sort of, even for a dungeon master, that's a question you think, because it's, what's the digestive system of a minotaur, because they're also known as being, man-eating beasts, but they are half bull, so they would, you get in these odd questions. So the fighter is not interested at all in learning more about his weapon or anything else like that, but he's turning down magical items. They come across a magical bow. They find it. They know that this is like a +3 magical bow, and they look at the party, and most of the party is outfitted, and they ask the fighter, "Would you want this?" And he goes, No, all I need is my sword." And they're thinking, well, ranged attacks are occasionally useful. No, I don't want anything like that. So they start to wonder a little bit. And the party is just sort of intrigued. You've got this fighter who's just charges to the front, and he slaughters everything. He does very well as sort of a tank character, but he takes an awful lot of damage because he's not wearing magical armor, is not interested in magical armor, even, like taking, replacing his standard ringmail with ringmail +1. No, I'm fine with what I've got. And they're going, this is a little strange. And everything he spends by now, the scabbard for this sword is jewel encrusted, and it's really gaudy looking. And he always sleeps with his sword next to him, and he's whispering things to his sword at night. So they sort of wonder a little bit about this, but he keeps going on, and the character is there. Finally, the party gets a little curious about this sword, and so they start looking to see if they can figure out what's going on. And finally, one of them notices engraved on the sword some runes, and he takes some notes and then goes back and asks his sage what it says, and the runes say Cud-Slayer. So they sort of wonder, they don't know an awful lot about this. The party keeps going on. They find out that the sword is a +3 magical sword. Sounds great, but it's cursed. Well, not really cursed. It has it's +3 against normal creatures, +5 against any creature that chews cud, which is there. But it's also, this is first edition, this is an intelligent sword, an extremely intelligent sword with a lot of ego, and it totally controls the character. So life goes on for a long period of time, and the character starts getting up there to 7th level. And this is the first point in the height of the character and the intelligence you have to look through on how it works in first edition. That this is the first time where the control of the character is not absolute. The control of the character actually, up to this point in time, the sword has completely controlled the character. Now, there are some questions that they're seeing the character argue with the sword about maybe I should improve my armor, maybe I should do some other things. So the party's going along, and they various things. They end up with an NPC who is 9th level, but he's not very intelligent. It's another fighter. It's an NPC who is joined the party to assist. And what happens next is terrifying for the party. The characters, they go into the battle, and it should have been just a simple little battle, and their fighter rushes forward and charges into the monster, and the sword falls out of his hands. And the character is, oh my God, the sword fell out of my hands. So he reaches down to grab it, and he picks it up and drops it again and fumbles the sword. And meanwhile, he's being hacked to bits and just slaughtered. And at the end, the character tries to reach down for a sword, and he accidentally kicks the sword over toward the 9th level fighter. Well, the 9th level fighter, he says his initial thought is, I'll pick up the sword and throw it back to the other character. But what he does is he picks up the sword, looks at his other sword, throws his sword to the fighter, and now the 9th level NPC has got the sword, and he wades into battle and keeps going. And, it's sort of, to the victor go the spoils. Meanwhile, the fighter's over there with a normal sword in the middle of things, and he ends up dying. And the 9th level character's got this sword, and he says, basically, adios to the party. But that's the tale of Cud-Slayer. The Cud-Slayer, the sword. It was a magical sword, +3, and you ought to if you have first edition, read the rules about intelligent swords. It actually added a lot of interest to the party because you had this character who's playing a fighter who's totally obsessed with his sword. Makes it reminiscent of the scenes in Full Metal Jacket where Leonard is whispering to his rifle at night. And that's this was before Full Metal Jacket came out, but it's the same idea, that he loved his sword. He spent all his money on the scabbard for the sword, and finally the sword decided, I can't control the character, so I'm going to find a new host, shall we say, a new fighter. And what he did was, that was why the fighter dropped the sword. The sword made the fighter drop the sword. The sword, as he tries to pick up the sword doesn't want to be picked up. And the sword, in his last gasp at control of the character, has the character try to grab the sword and instead kick it over to the other character, to the other NPC. So the sword is out for its own. It sees another NPC that is higher level, that he can control because he's not as intelligent. And you have to look up I can't remember all the stats, and I didn't look all the things, but the sword knew that he could control this NPC for longer and go on. But this is this cursed magical sword that just has a couple of little quirks that made it really interesting, because the party's going, the fighter, we've got a +3 bow, don't you want it? No, I want my sword. My sword is all I ever need. That's the only weapon I ever need. And they think about it, and he charges into battle because the sword wants to, every story he tells, the fighter tells, he tells how wonderful the sword has been, until the sword abandoned him. And so I miss intelligent swords. They're an interesting feature of first edition, and they added some interesting things to the game that could be played in bizarre ways. And then when you have a character who is willing to basically be sort of controlled by the DM, the sword controlled the character absolutely up until 7th level. And because it's a combination of intelligence and level and so on, and the sword was high enough that he could control him. But at 7th level, there was a chance that the sword didn't fully control the character. So, but the player played it to the hilt. The DM, as a DM, I didn't have to do anything. The player knew, I am now Cud-Slayer, the sword. I'm going to go and kill anything. I'm going to jump into the midst of battle and slay things because that's what I do. I'm very good at it. But I also am totally obsessed with killing anything that chews the cud. If I see some animal out there like a camel or a cow, it was Cud-Slayer. And I can't for the life of me remember how we found this one, but where that idea came from, I don't think I was the original creator of it, but there was some bizarre table that I'd found, and when I created the sword, it had this minor quirk that it despised cud-chewing animals. So you can have some real fun with intelligent weapons. You create a weapon that dislikes, the color purple, which could have some real problems if you walked into town. But it's, you're always obsessed by various things. So putting little quirks in your magic items is always hilarious. Can cause some things where players can have advantages and disadvantages based upon that. And I truly miss intelligent swords. And I think when I revive the world of Tiglath, I'm probably going to put intelligent swords back in. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, press the thumbs up. If you don't like it, press the thumbs down. I like to see both. Doesn't matter. If you're new here and want to subscribe, there's a button below. If you're interested, there's more content to the right where you can see some of my other Dungeons & Dragons stories. Thank you.